I'm a researcher in this RIS3CAT project called FEMIOT, and basically we are part of the connected street. So the idea is mainly create new infrastructure for the connected streets in the smart cities. Nowadays, the pollution is collected by big stations with high price sensors that are using. Our idea is to use this kind of small sensors that are really more cheap, but taking into account that we can reduce the spatial resolution of these sensors. So taking advantage of these small sensors that can be installed in an easy way in many streets of the city, take the information from these sensors. In here we have the particle sensor or gas sensor, ozone sensor. So try to reduce this spatial resolution and obtain more information in real time.
If we think about mobility, basically the first thing that it comes to our mind is how to reduce or the problems linked with the need to move things and people around the city. Basically, cars move around, and to make that feasible, they consume some kind of energy. This generates basically some kind of issues that may affect the health of the people. And so the goal of this project is to be able to monitor these parameters. Something which we believe is quite revolutionary is that it's true that the city has currently information about the air quality in a quite general way. I mean, not in a specific region, not in a specific zones. So our project aims to deal on that, to see what's the quality on that street, on that part of the square, so have this low-level information which may help, like in the case of the superblocks, to identify if, for instance, the superblocks is a good solution in terms of improving the air quality of that region, of where the superblock is applied. And indeed, one of the questions that we wonder in this project is, okay, superblocks seems a very good idea because they reduce the number of vehicles moving around, the speed of the vehicles and whatever, so it should improve the air quality, so we want to validate that. However, how this affects the streets surrounding the superblock.
We want also to take into account the pollution, how it affects to schools. It's some papers affirms that pollution affects also to the development of children. So the idea is to monitor this pollution around surrounding the schools. So taking into account that these sensors that we are installing are easy deploying, the idea is not only trying to cope with the mobility, not only trying to solve mobility problems, also cope with the problems that can appear to the children with the pollution surrounding the schools.
All the technology necessary to get the data from the sensors to the cloud, to the place where it can be processed and analyzed. We are also taking the opportunity in this project to test our own technology. We have developed some new protocols, some new ideas that are much more efficient. And another aspect that we believe is quite interesting of our project is that we use also the data to optimize the network. For instance, using machine learning or artificial intelligence, we can create estimators based on the data that we gather, as well as data from other networks or external data, to predict what will happen in the future. So we can change the behavior of the network to adapt to those expected changes.
Well, the project is composed by different universities and research centers of Catalonia. This project is funded by the Generalitat and receives funds from FEDER program. And in the project, we also have an executive committee of different enterprises and businesses that are interested in this infrastructure that we want to create. The project has started at the beginning of 2020. And the main idea is that at the end, at mid-2021, try to implement the first infrastructure in the city.
I mean, it will be a very relevant approach just for the city council or other organizations around, just to plan future actions on the city or to improve the mobility in the area of Barcelona, but also internationally.
I guess here we are. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Giovanni Maccani. I'm a senior researcher at Ideas for Change. And today, together with my colleague, Dr. Valeria Righi, we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about how can citizens produce data to advance their own agenda. A bit of introduction about the topic. Well, before then, just wanted to remind you that if you have any questions about these presentations, please post them on Twitter using the hashtag, WeDiscover. So then we'll save some time at the end to address your questions if you have any. So a little bit of introduction, I guess, is today, because of rapid adoption and pervasiveness, I guess, and the decreasing price of digital technologies, analytical capabilities, and the idea that everyone can really use, and the increase of digital skills amongst the population is really opening up a lot of opportunities for not only businesses or researchers to be empowered to use them to enable change, right? So this idea is translating into engaging citizens as well as lay people in scientific research endeavors. So which means that citizens through technologies are more and more empowered to drive an agenda towards positive change. This usually comes, in research at least, under the umbrella of the discipline that's called citizen science, which really captures the idea of involving citizens across all steps of a traditional research project. So involving citizens in the problem formulation and in the establishment of a research question, throughout the design of the actual research or the intervention, data collection, analysis, as well as actions that may derive from that analysis. So this is pretty much the space that is gonna be the focus of our presentation today. We'll go through myself and Valeria a number of projects, a number of concepts, a number of methodologies that we've been developing over the years at Ideas for Change with this respect, I guess. So a bit of introduction about our company. So Ideas for Change is an SME based in Barcelona that has, let's say, two main areas in which we work, a research area and a consultancy area, which are pretty much interrelated, in which one informs the other, not necessarily research informing consultancy, but also the other way around. In terms of research, where it's, I guess, where myself and Vale mainly belong to, what we do is we really every day ask ourselves, how can we leverage existing or emerging technologies to help citizens, to help people advance in their own agenda. We do that across a number of fields, as I hope will become clear by the end of this presentation. And the idea is that we try and formalize that learning to inform the design of socially impactful business models through our consultancy work, which also leverages some of the methodologies that we've been developing internally, including the Pentagrowth business model design methodology. And as said, we operate in several different domains with several different technologies. Beyond citizen science, we're also interested in themes like data governance, and we're part of a cooperative for distributed data governance principle, which is called Salus COP. We also work with distributed ledger technologies and blockchain in another project that's called DLT4EU, which we really try and investigate what is the role that blockchain technologies can do for social good. So I guess I'll hand it over to Vale now. I'll come back later and she'll talk more about citizen science projects.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Giovanni, for the introduction. It's a very pleasure to be here. So as said before by Giovanni, today we want to foster a reflection on the role of data and how data can be used to drive positive changes and address issues that most concern us. And as consumer of digital product, we are pretty much aware that we are producing data all the time. Either we are talking on the phone, shopping online, reading newspaper, or just walking on the street with our mobile in the pocket. So recently, the society seems to be more aware of the importance of protecting the data. And perhaps this awareness has increased due to the growing number of news about misuse of our data. And Cambridge Analytica is perhaps the most well-known example of misuse of citizen data. But every day, the newspaper told stories about how data are improperly shared, how they reach people for whom they were not intended. Next. So these are some of the examples of the many examples of the recent news on newspaper. However, despite these scenarios of dystopia, data can function as a lever of social change. And even if they are still the minority, newspapers increasingly report stories of citizens that come together to find solutions to problems that affect their lives. They collect the data and build evidence to inform better policies and improve their communities. These are known as citizen-generated data. And this type of data generally have three main functions. Next. So they can be collected to augment existing data set, or they can be collected to contrast official data set, or they can create data on new topics where they were not available at all, such kind of data. So over the last 6 years, more or less, at Ideas for Change, we have supported different types of community in collecting data that they care about. Next. No? In order to understand a problem and find a possible solution. And these are some of the examples. Most of them are related with environmental issues. So we have collected data, for instance, about damp, noise, odor, food, air pollution. And today we are going to show you 3 of these cases. So we have selected a case, an old one actually, that is now complete, so that you can see the whole process. And then we are going to present you other 2 cases that are still ongoing. So the first question is, how do we do this? How can we actually foster and orchestrate these kind of processes? Of course, this is nothing that is improvised, but instead it requires a careful planning. And for this reason, we have developed ad hoc methodological framework that help us design strategy that plan intervention of this kind. And here are 2 of the most important engagement framework that we have developed and we are using in our project. At the left, you see the Bristol approach, while at the right is like a sort of evolution of the Bristol approach that is especially used in the context of a more scientific research. And I'm not going to give you all the detail of how this framework works. In fact, we are going to discover you through the stories that we are telling you later. But to be very short, the most important things to know is that the starting point of any of this process always needs to be the identification of an issues that citizens care about. Then you will involve them in co-designing the data collection protocol. That meaning you decide how, when, where, and what data you are going to collect to build solid evidence of the problem. You then deploy the data collection, so meaning you collect the data together with the community, you assess the impact of your intervention, and you plan courses of action to drive changes. So the first example is the case of making sense. It's the case of the community of neighbors living in Plaza del Sol. Perhaps for the one of you who lives in Barcelona, Plaza del Sol is a very well-known plaza in the neighborhood of Gracia that has experienced the problem of noise since many years. By involving citizens living in the plaza, we understood that the problem was caused by leisure activities. So people simply sitting in the plaza, chatting, playing music, and drinking beers. Although no one was doing anything wrong, we discovered that there were levels of noise that affect health, and that there is a regulation, in fact, that regulates the level allowed. So the community really wanted to measure whether the noise experienced in their house exceeded this level. And they wanted to collect data to argue that the problem was not just their perception. They were just really interested to know if there was a lack of regulation. So next. So we put sensor on the balcony of family living in the plaza. So together with the community, we co-designed the data collection strategy. Basically, we decided where to put the sensor in order to assure that all the different spaces of the plaza could be covered and could be measured at the different level of the building, for instance. We also engage participants in the analysis and the interpretation of the data. Next. Here you can see example of the community actually analyzing the data. And the next one. Here you will see some example of the data, because in fact the data was published live streaming on an online platform, and we could assess that actually the data collected through the participant sensor were in accordance with the data from the official environmental station. So we then organized a citizen assembly to take action and make proposal with to the local administration to try to mitigate the problem. Next. And here you see some news from the local newspaper of the result of this intervention. In fact, the administration took action on these issues. And of course, although the problem was not totally solved, because this is a very complex and wicked problem, it's very interesting to see that some of the citizen proposals were implemented. For instance, the stairs on the plaza that was around the plaza were transformed into planters to avoid people sitting in the stair, or too much people sitting on the stairs. And also a playground was built in an attempt to change the use of the plaza. The next one is the example of the playground that is currently there. So the case that I just presented is about a very localized community, so very small scale. Next. Okay. So now the question is, how can we scale up such kind of process? How can we move from engage a neighborhood community to reaching a citywide scale? So the example that I'm going to show now is aimed to reach this goal. And it is actually an ongoing project, so it's still not ended. CitySalt is the name of the project. CitySalt is a European project that aims to understand how pollution is affecting our health. And it aims to do so by fostering the collaboration between citizen and researcher, and putting at the center of the research agenda the topic that most concerns citizens. So the first thing that we did was to identify the topics that citizen wants to investigate. Next. Okay. So for this, we have decided to launch a citywide campaign to invite citizens to answer a short survey that asked about their concern about interest and perception on air pollution and health. And here, as you can see, it's a very different strategies from the previous project. Here, it's not about just engaging a relatively small number of people living in the same area, but really how can we do an activity that reach the city's wide scale. And of course here the engagement strategies was necessary, not to move from the face-to-face to also do something online in order to ensure the scale up of the project, of the process. But in order to promote this survey and ensure also that people living in the different part of the city would answer it, we organized a one-day pop-up intervention that consisted, next slide. Yes, that consisted in distributed 1,000 plants of strawberry plant that are used to measure air pollution. So basically the idea of this plant is that citizens living in the different neighborhoods of Barcelona host a strawberry plant during 3 months. Then they send a leaf to have it analyzed. The analysis is done in collaboration with another national citizen science project that is called the Vigilante dell'Aire. And the final outcome that we want to reach is to have a map of air pollution built together with the strawberry plant of participants. This campaign was very successful for several reasons. And first of all, because it allowed us to engage with over 1,000 people from all over different districts in Barcelona in just one single day. And the plant also created a form of attachment with the participants and motivated them to be part in the next activities of the project, and also allowed us to keep in contact with them. And also this face-to-face event allowed us to involve people who may not have reached by only the online campaign. So that was an excuse also to promote the online surveys. So just to summarize, over 600 people answered the online surveys to collect their concerns about air pollution and health. And next, what we decided was next also was to organize a co-creation workshop where we presented the result of the surveys, and we started the brainstorming possible research question together with the participants. And finally, the group of the research group in IES Global, the epidemiological expert, conducting a feasibility studies to understand the viability of the different questions that were proposed. And we finally selected 8 possible questions, and we launched an online public voting to vote for the final question that would be addressed in the next phases of the project. And surprise, surprise, the topic selected, the next one. Okay, that was the example of the online voting. And the next one. So the topic selected was related to mental health. And here you can see the question that we are now trying to address with the current activities. So the participants wanted to understand how the relation between air pollution, noises, the use of green spaces, so the use that people make of the park or of the sea, can affect the mental health of citizens in Barcelona. Next. So the next activity was to organize a co-creation workshop with a group of participants in order to start in design the study protocol, meaning what data can be collected, how we can collect it with this data, which tool can be used, which aspect of the mental health we are most interested on. And in the next slide, you can see the outcome of this phase. Basically, to summarize, we are now collecting two types of data. One data is about mental health. So we are collecting data about sleep quality, attention, stress, which are gathered by using an app that asks daily questions to participants over the course of 2 weeks. And the other type of data that we are collecting are related with the personal exposure of pollution and green spaces. So how can we collect this? Basically, we estimate these values through people's movement around in the cities. So we ask participants to share their GPS, and they can do through the app, through the same app that is used to collect mental data. And also, if they want, participants can use a diffusion tube, that is the one that you can see in the picture, that basically you wear this tube when you go out home working, and you need to wear the tube for 1 week, and the tube capture a different particle and the NO2. So that gives us an estimate of how much pollution you have been exposed during the 1 week. And in order to onboard participants to the experiment, we have created these citizen kits, which contain all the information and the material needed to start collecting data. Next. So we are now currently distributing this kit to anyone who is interested in participating. The only requirement is that people must live in Barcelona. And in order to distribute this kit, again, we use somehow the same strategy of the strawberry campaign. So we have done a big pop-up event in correspondence to the parking day, which is like an event that is done globally. And during this day, we have distributed to give this kit to the people passing by. But also we are, next one. We are keep distributing this kit until the end of the year. So if you live in Barcelona, if you are interested in participate, you can check out our webpage and ask for your kit. We will deliver the kit by bike at your home. And this is all with respect to the activity conducting until now within this project. What we are planning to do for the next phase is to involve participants also in the data analysis, so that they can give us their insight about the data that have been collected. And the next would be to promote a dialogue with the local administration and relevant stakeholders in order to propose possible courses of action or possible recommendation for improving the living and the mobility in the city. We can't. And now Giovanni will show you another ongoing project.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Vale. That was very interesting. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some more projects we're involved in within the citizen science discourse. And first one is We Count. WeCount is an H2020 European project that focuses on citizen science and traffic counting for addressing solutions towards a more sustainable mobility in cities. So as I said, it's a H2020 funded project, and we are working on it together with 6 other partners across 5 different countries. And the project is, well, it has a core element, which is a traffic counting sensor, which I'm going to talk about. And then this is, I say, developed or delivered, I guess, across 5 different pilots in 5 different countries. Why do we do that? Why does the European Commission want us to do that? Well, obviously, the idea is that whenever you get involved, as Vale, I guess, explained very well, whenever you get involved in a citizen science intervention, what you really find out is that you need to move from a very general central element of a project, which is the common denominator across the different pilots projects, to something that is really context specific. Citizen science really works, as Valeria said, I guess, if you engage citizens in a meaningful way. And to do that, the best way to do that is to position your study within something that they're really concerned about, that they're really experiencing in their everyday lives. So going back to the point, why do we do 5 different pilots? It's really to be able to investigate the same core element, which is in this case a sensor for traffic counting, across different contexts, to then increase the generalizability of the learning and of the outcomes that are generated within a project, right? And that's really very well seen by the European Commission. So as I said, this is done in 5 different countries. We are 6 partners working on it, 3 from Belgium, Polis Communication, Technology Mobility Leuven, that's the company that's producing the sensors, Mobile 21. There's a University of West England in Bristol that's leading a pilot in Cardiff, Wales. University College Dublin, that's leading a pilot in Ireland. University of Ljubljana, that's leading a pilot in Ljubljana, Slovenia. And then there's ourselves that lead the pilot in Barcelona and Madrid here in Spain. So the strategy is the following. So together with Belgium and Leuven, the Belgian partners, we are starting our exploratory pilot in these months. And the idea is that once we finish, we'll be able to test, explore, and develop new resources, so then to inform the 3 other pilots that will start next year, at some point in spring next year. So a bit of highlights, again, traffic counting for sustainable mobility. We have available more than 300 sensors that we're distributing across Barcelona and Madrid. And I'm gonna talk about this for the next few minutes. So let's see. Okay, so how did we start, right? So citizen science, going back to what we said before, to what Val explained, engaging citizen in every single step of your research project, right? So since the problem formulation. So likewise, Cities Health, what we did first was, okay, let's get the sense of what people think about mobility, of what their concerns are. And we done that through an online survey. I guess traffic counting and sustainable mobility are very complex topics, like environmental epidemiology, as we've heard in Cities Health, right? So for instance, I don't know, traffic counting can be related to several different actions or several different policies that are relevant for sustainable mobility. For example, traffic counting can have influence on decisions about urban design, about space allocation, about contamination, about noise pollution, about air quality, about parking, about road safety. So obviously, within the course of a project that's 3 years long, like this one, actually 2.5 years long, we cannot do everything. And once again, we want to define what the specific focus of the intervention is, and we want to do that with citizens. So through the online survey, what we've done was, okay, what do you concerns the most? What does it concern you the most with respect to mobility? And the findings shown that both in Barcelona and Madrid, air quality was the most voted, right? So that already gave a sort of a shape or helped to frame a little bit the pilot beyond the giant topic of sustainable mobility. Then, obviously, that's not enough, likewise in Cities Health, right? As we've heard. So what we typically would do, and what we've done in Cities Health would be, a lot of hands-on activities together with citizens, which would include living lab type of methods like city safari, like getting a community of citizens and walking around the city and doing observation, capturing their reactions to get a more bottom-up formulation of what's the issue that we want to tackle, right? Other methods could be roundtables, pop-up interventions, and so on. But with WeCount, unfortunately, we had COVID and we had to move everything online. So we're doing that at the moment through the organization of a series of online workshops with specific communities. And here on the right, you can actually see one of the resources that we are using at the moment to capture citizens' input about what exactly concerns them. What is their problem with respect to mobility? This specific one is, well, obviously, we had to be dynamic. We had to adapt to the COVID situation, and we started exploring what the online world can offer us to undertake these exercises, I suppose. We use different softwares like Zoom, like we're using now. We use Miro for participatory exercises. We use Slido for polls and questionnaires and so on. And this example here on the right is what we call the WeCount timeline, which we use with Miro. It's basically a canvas that displays a typical day with all the hours and the year with all the months. And we were asking people in a participatory exercise to just drag a post-it and write what do they experience in their street and in their neighbors. What are the problems during the day? A lot of people telling us, 1 a.m. there's a rubbish truck that comes and makes a lot of noise. A lot of people say, hey, I have a bus stop downstairs that makes a lot of noise when people go to school at 9 a.m. in the morning. This is very valuable for us for several reasons. Well, first of all, it makes feel people's input being appreciated or participant input being appreciated. And also it will, once again, consistently with what is a citizen science methodology, dictate a little bit what will be the focus of the analysis, right? So imagine now we'll distribute sensors, we'll be able to measure these incidences, we will be able to measure these facts, right? And whenever it'll be the end, people will be able to compare what their perception is and the actual data that they will have collected. Okay, so participatory problem formulation, air quality, sustainable mobility, traffic counting, and a really in-depth understanding for each participant on what concerns them with respect to mobility in their street or neighborhood. So, air quality. Again, last year with CityCell, the experience went really well with the strawberry plants. We've joined the, as Valeria said, the Vigilantes del Aire Citizen Science Initiative, organized by Ibercivis with the support of the Ministry of Science and Technology. And we've repeated that this year, right? Why did we do so? Not just because we lack ideas, or not because we lack ideas, because we actually don't, but really because the experience was good in many ways. So Valeria explained us how great it was for community building to use this non-digital, more attractive sort of way of engagement and sensing really, but also because the results from last year have shown that this is a particularly accurate method for measuring air quality, as the results were pretty much aligned with the data from the official air quality measuring stations, right? So how does it work? Very briefly, we were giving out, again, 1,000 plans, 300 in Madrid and 700 in Barcelona. Not because we like Barcelona more, but it was because of logistics reasons. We are here and we're not in Madrid. And with COVID, the logistics were very difficult, you can tell. And the idea is that citizens or participants host the plant for about 3 months on their windows or on their balconies. And the plant is very good for acting as a biosensor for air quality, meaning that the strawberry plants leaves are very good for metals in the air to kind of deposit on top of them. So the participation is simple. People get a plant, water them, take care of them during 3 months. And after 3 months, they simply have to cut 2 or 3 leaves, put them in an envelope, send them to a lab. And the lab would return results in terms of pollution level on people's window and balconies, right? And that includes PM10, PM2.5, and PM1. Okay, bit of reflection again, right? So engaging people, moving online, things are getting more difficult because obviously organizing online workshops is not easy, especially now during COVID, where, you know, at least myself, I can't attend any online thing any longer, just the ones that I have to. But this was a very good way to involve people because it's easy to understand. It was very well caught by the media because I guess the title is interesting, Get Your Strawberry Plant to Measure Air Quality. Kind of a contradictory title, if that makes sense, so people get interested in that. But also, actually, the problems that we had during the logistics, in which, you know, we wished we could have done like last year, where we had an event one day, was where we gave away all the plants across the different neighborhoods in Barcelona. But in this case, because of COVID, we had to organize a network of distribution, and it was a crazy effort from the team at Ideas for Change. But what we did was we really created a network of shops, civic centers, libraries, and other places that endorsed the project, got a number of plans, a little stand with the sensor and some QR codes to get on board on the project. And that was really useful to then create a network of partners to better penetrate the citizens' communities in Barcelona. So that was the air quality part. And then what about the sensor? So counting traffic. Again, counting traffic, which is the core, I guess, aspect of WeCount project, it's not an easy thing, right? And as I said before, it can be an input for several different public policies across several different domains, like road safety, urban design, road and transport planning, and so on and so forth, right? So how do we normally do traffic counting? Well, you'd be surprised to hear that several different councils, what they do is they still adopt manual counting techniques, whereby they send an employee to a big junction where there's a lot of traffic, where there's big loads of traffic, and simply with a counter, they stay there for an hour and they count how many cars pass by. There are automated technologies that can do that nowadays, but all of them have limitations, right? And mainly all of them are very expensive, which allows placing them in very much discrete places. Once again, where the load of traffic is typically high. So at the entrance of a motorway, where there's tolls, or in any other big junction. So there are solutions out there like microwave-based sensing or infrared-based sensing, laser inductive, and so on and so forth. But again, very expensive and only for discrete places. How can we know how many cars, how many bicycles, how many trucks pass by in a small road as well? How can we monitor traffic throughout the city? So what do? We do it with the sensor that's depicted in this slide, which is called Telram. It's a sensor being developed by Technology and Mobility Leuven, who's the coordinator of the H2020 WeCount project. So how does it work? It works as an image recognition based traffic counting. So it's this little box that it's plugged in all the time. I'm going to unpack it in a second, but just wanted to comment that this is based on camera grabbing objects and classification of those objects amongst pedestrians, cars, bicycles, and trucks, which are counted as well as measured by the speed they pass by in front of the window. So the sensor is low cost and it needs to comply with some boundary conditions. So the sensor needs to be fixed at the window, and that's, well, everybody has windows. But what it needs also is a completely clear view to the street, right? So again, this suggests an important reflection at the first place, which goes back to what we were saying before. You know, sometimes we tend to think that technology is something universal, but in this case, it demonstrates that it's actually not, right? So this technology was developed in Belgium. It works really well in places like UK, like Ireland, where, you know, buildings are typically low, There's not many balconies because it rains a lot. I lived in Ireland for 9 years and I can tell you. And there's not many trees. And now whenever we try to integrate that into the Barcelona and Madrid urban design, we experience issues, right? So back to the point, how do we measure traffic? Telegram sensor based on image recognition, which needs to be fixed on a window, and it needs a clear view on the street, and the problems around urban design in Madrid and Barcelona, unlike Belgium, are creating some engaging or engagement related issue. Just to comment, the sensors are being distributed to participants in Madrid and Barcelona, which will remain with the participants after the end of the experiment. Not because we want to reward them for their participation, but one of the things that we really aim to do at the end of WeCount is to really maintain the ecosystem, maintain the communities measuring traffic, or planting their own sustainable mobility related intervention through these sensors, through the strawberry plants, or through the integration of whatever they may think it's appropriate, right? So a little bit more about the sensor. So what's inside this sensor? There are, well, in this picture, you see the basic components that we received before installing them. And there's three main key components, I'd say. One is a Raspberry Pi, which is what I'm pointing now with my cursor. And many of you may be familiar what a Raspberry Pi is, but it's basically a single board computer. It's a low-cost computer, which was initially developed in the UK, thinking about teaching uses, and specifically it was designed because of facilitating computer science education in developing countries, because it's low cost, right? It costs between 35 and 70, I think, US dollars based on the RAM size, which is around 30 to 60 euros. Okay, so over time, Raspberry Pi became very popular, and it's now used in many different domains, including robotics. And it became really popular because it's really a low cost and portable computer. It has the size of a credit card. Second key element is the camera module. That's the one that grabs the object. And third, we have in the SD card that's inserted within the Raspberry Pi, there is the image recognition software. So how does it work? The image recognition software does not include any machine learning or AI algorithm. It's simply a logic algorithm. And then basically the camera grabs an object and the software classifies that object between cars, pedestrian, bicycles, and trucks based on two different parameters. One is the relationship between the axis of the object. So think about a car, it's way longer than taller, whereas a pedestrian is the other way around. And the vertical axis in the pedestrian would be approximately double the horizontal one, and the car the other way around. So that's the first way of distinguishing one and another. And the other one is the fillness index of the object grabbed by the camera. Importantly, and that's a question that we've received a lot during our experimentation during the summer, this is not a public camera, meaning that the sensor is plugged in all the time because the images and the videos are processed within the sensor. So what happens is that there is no video, no images that leaves the sensor, and that it's stored anywhere, and no one can access the images or the videos from the camera. Otherwise, it would be a legal barrier, I guess, as the CCTV law would apply to the sensor. So the sensor is connected to the home Wi-Fi and sends data to a platform where data is visualized in real time as open data. So just to comment for some of those that may be interested, the data is accessible by anyone for any non-commercial purpose. And there's a link on this slide to the API that people can use to extract the data and reuse them the way they want. and to the data license documentation. Also, the software is open source and is published on GitHub at the link displayed in this slide. Okay, let's look at data now. So this is the platform where the data is visualized in real time. Now, what you see here is the map of Barcelona. And again, for privacy reasons, the map does not show the exact address where the sensor is installed, but only the segment of road where it is placed, right? So the idea here is that, well, you see that there's not many sensors now in Barcelona. These are the results of the first wave that we've, of delivering of sensors that we've done during the summer, what we've called beta pilot, which is really the first phase of the experiment where we tried to engage community champions through what we call the train the trainer approach. So the idea is to go through the overall process once with people that we consider can be not used, sounds bad, but can be part of the project to then promote and the actual citizen science intervention within their own communities, having developed the knowledge of what the sensor is, how can visualize the data, how can you install the sensor, and so on and so forth. Actually going to show you a little bit the, if I can manage, here, the platform and how it works. So here are the sensors that are in Barcelona, and everybody can go and see it. You can go on a road segment, and what it shows is how many objects were measured in the last hour. Then if you click on it, you can go on the actual profile of the specific sensor. And I have one open here, which is in Calle Rosdolano here in Barcelona, again in the neighbor of Gracia. And so for every sensor, what we can do is, well, for instance, we can set up a date for which we want the data from. And it shows how many pedestrians, how many bicycles, how many cars, and how many trucks have passed in front of that window within those dates. Then an overview per day. So here, for instance, we see that over the weekend, there was not many trucks, there was less traffic, and this is also crossed with weather information. Then per hour during the day, the distribution of objects per hour during the day, again, very quiet during the night, and the speed at which the object has passed by in front of the sensor. Here, there's very few cars that have traveled 70 kilometers per hour or plus, and this is probably due to the calibration of the sensor, as this is a small street. Finally, what you have is also information by direction, so object coming left to right and right to left. And finally, a summary of objects that have passed in front of their windows. So I'll go back to my presentation. Hope you can see it well. Yeah, so this is basically the data that's openly available for every sensor that's being installed, right? So again, as I said, the intervention started at the beginning of the summer through what we call the beta pilot, to involve community champions, to test the process, to develop resources, to learn ourselves. Then the pilot is articulated in 3 different phases. First phase, as I said, where we do this problem formulation exercise, we explain technology, how it works, the installation, and so on. Then there is a phase where we'll analyze the data together with participants, and here will be our call to take into account what their input was at the very beginning, and cross the data with openly available data, data from the strawberry plants, and so on. And the idea is, through that analysis process, together with participants, co-create proposals for new public policies to inform new public policies towards a more sustainable mobility based on the data collected by the citizens, right? Finally, there's going to be a final event where these proposals will be delivered to the public authority. Again, here we're doing this. This is the 3-workshop methodology that we've developed. And we're doing this with several different communities based on their interest, based on their location. Sometimes you have a neighborhood that is specifically concerned about something very specific. So it does make sense to have a specific subgroup, I'd say, or community within the project. So that's WeCount. This is also ongoing. We are now distributing sensors. If you live in Barcelona or Madrid and you're interested to participate, there's our web. It's www.weCountMovilidad, movilidad.eu. So you can go on the website, you can ask for your sensor or join the project and be part of WeCount. Now, two more projects that we would like to give some highlights, again, in relation to citizen science and the work we do within citizen science and European project. First one is called DNosis. DNosis, it's an interesting one. It's about odor pollution. And I think that this one is, it might be clearer than in other example, the value of citizen science, right? So odors and smells are a big issue, are something that annoys us or annoys people quite a lot. And unlike other things like air quality or noise pollution, where the problems reside mainly in the fact that there is data, but it's usually not openly available and discrete, and is very much discrete. Whereas when it comes to odor, sensor technology just don't exist, right? And how do we measure odors? I mean, there's typically, well, the thing that, or the method that are being used is literally experts that go and smell and then develop some dynamic model of propagation based on the wind to estimate the diffusion of these odors. Unlike air quality and noise pollution, there's a lack of regulation. So in noise pollution, you have, I don't know, after a certain time in the day, there's a maximum number of decibels that you can emit, right? But with odors, it's not the case, right? So here, why is valuable citizen science, and what do we do with DNosis? So DNosis aims at engaging, well, it doesn't aim, it does engage citizens in mapping odors in cities, right? It does it through an app. It's called the Odor Collect app, where people can, based on their experience, map an odor at a certain time in a certain place. They can decide between different categories. It can smell like rubbish, like whatever, and based on the intensity from -5 to +5, based on whether it's a good or bad experience, basically, right? Here, the objective is to realize or achieve a comprehensive map of odors in several different cities. In this case, there's 10 different pilots, 8 in Europe and 2 outside of Europe, in Kampala, Uganda, and Los Alamos in Chile. And the idea is to achieve this map of odors in the city, and then from there, start and try to identify what are the emitting activities, which are usually industries. Once again, the value of doing 10 pilots is because when you do have this core element, which is the odor collect app and the DNosis methodology, but once again, the specific issues and challenges are very much situated. So there's, in Chile, the odors are, or the area of intervention is an area where over 3,000 residents are affected by odors emitted by wastewater treatment plants. Some others focus on farming activities, some others focus on agriculture, some others focus on sewers or any other things, right? So here, again, this is also ongoing. So far, across the different pilots, there have been hundreds of entries. Maps of odors start to appear in the Odor Collect app. And there's these debates with industry that start to happen. Although this is a challenge, right? So whereas involving a public authority, sometimes it's easier, industries is proving a challenge. And this is mainly, and that's my opinion, I guess, because of the novelty of the topic, right? And the lack of regulation and the kind of fear that sometimes industries may have with respect to the results of the study and what that can mean to them. Just checking the time. Okay, last one, last project we want to talk about. Same principle, citizen science, involving citizens at all steps of the research. It's food mapping. And we made a promise. So we do operate across completely different domains. This one is about food, again, involving citizens to explore their food environment, as well as how they experience them, and with the final goal of two things mainly. One is to map the food environment, map the way people experience it to inform new policies. The other one is to explore what sustainable diets and sustainable practices may be fostered within the communities of participants, so to foster behavioral change, so a sort of educational piece for participants to change their behavior when it comes to food practices and sustainable diets. So what was this experiment about? This experiment was about identifying 3 different citizen communities in 3 different neighborhoods in Barcelona, and give them a common recipe, which in this case was a lentil soup. We picked a lentil soup because it's a recipe that includes a lot of ingredients. And people were having an app and were monitored on their experience on going to buy the different ingredients. And we met them together again to make a cooking session and exchange feedback and gather more qualitative information. Once again, here, what we were able to do with an application was to observe how people experience a given food environment, why they do so, how much they spend. That was really useful for us to reach some conclusions in terms of, first of all, what different food environments we have in Barcelona. Here, the example is about the average price spent by people. As expected, those in the city center were way more expensive than those in the suburban areas. So now, what are we doing with this? With this, we are going on stage 2 with different, more ambitious proposals together with several different other cities in Europe to scale this from Barcelona to an European project. With the focus on, once again, understanding food environments, how people experience them and why, to then foster behavioral change within the citizen communities, as well as propose together with them new public policies for more sustainable food environments, right? So this was an overview of some of the projects we've been involved in over the last few years. And I want to share with you some of the challenges that we've been experiencing. I guess 2 amongst all. One is the role of public authorities. So one of the key elements of these projects is what is called the Quadrupolex model of innovation, right? So the idea of researchers together, or academia, together with industry, together with citizens, together with public authorities, working together for more sustainable and meaningful innovation, right? So we touched a little bit upon the role of industries in the noses, but again, the key role here, especially because the final goal of these projects is always to co-create proposals for new public policies, is played by public authorities, whether at local, national, regional, or European scale, depending on the actual intervention. So in this case, the approach that we do use usually is to try and engage them from the very beginning. And that's, we believe, the winning approach, because by doing so, we make sure that the intervention, the data collection, the data analysis is going to be relevant for the plans of the public authority and is going to be uptaken at the end. However, this is not always possible for several different reasons. Sometimes it's the attitude of a specific public authority. Sometimes they're afraid of getting more work. Sometimes they cannot possibly formally collaborate with a project that doesn't have a formal governance structure or a formal organization, and they cannot, because of strict procurement rule, actively collaborate. So in that case, unlike the first one, where we have them on board throughout the project, is the project that takes another angle towards a more activist, I guess, approach, where citizens collect the data, and instead of collaborating with the city authority, then end up doing demonstration and protest informed by the data to foster and ask for change, right? The second one is the one that's depicted in this slide, and that's around scaling, sustainability, and replicability, which we touched a little bit upon that now when talking about food mapping and scaling that to European scale. And you can understand that the different cultures, the different food environments, the different habits of people, the different priorities of people may be a challenge if you want to generalize an approach that you've done in Barcelona or in a Mediterranean country to Norway, for example, right? But this is also the case with the recount technology, right? Many times we tend to believe that technologies are universal, but in this case, technology developed in Belgium is not working as well in contexts like the Spanish one, right? So, but generally speaking, and we touched upon that as well, the citizen science intervention, to be effective, they need to be specific. They need to tackle something that people really care about, that people experience in their daily lives. And to define that, you need to go very much context specific. And the outcome of that is that the learning from it is usually very much situated in the context in which the project was implemented. And that goes, I guess, also against what is the reasoning behind European or publicly funded projects, right? And the last thing they want, I guess, is that the learning and the outcomes of a project stay in the same context, but also tend to disappear once these projects finish, right? So H2020 projects, like other European project or publicly funded project, have a beginning and have an end. And once they finish, they tend to remain as a website that's not updated. And it seems that the learning sort of disappears over time, right? So key question for the discipline is, how can we foster scaling, replicability, spreading of citizen science interventions, outcomes, and impact? And to do that, we've recently conducted an extensive research project on the topic. And what we've done is we asked ourselves the following question: what are the factors that influence spreading and scaling of citizen science intervention? What we've done there was we've done a research study based on theoretical insights as well as empirical ones. So we went and looked into the literature on citizen science and more generally on social innovation. And what we realized was that scaling and spreading are terms that are usually used inconsistently and many times in a pretty much contradictory way, if that makes sense. So, right, so we did a step back and we looked at several other theories across different disciplines like sociology, information systems, and participatory design. And we were looking at what are the elements that influence diffusion of an innovation? What are the elements that influence adoption of a specific innovation or a specific technology or a specific practice from a psychological point of view, or from an individual point of view, when it makes a decision of adopting or rejecting innovation, but also from an organizational or community point of view. And finally, what are the elements that influence appropriation of technologies by communities from the participatory design and academic debates, I guess. So what's shown in this slide is the results of this theoretical exercise that we've done, in which it outlines what are the 9 different clusters that encompass all the elements that influence scaling and spreading in citizen science. So we've divided them into 3 main categories: elements that are intrinsic of the original citizen science intervention, elements that support the scaling process, and elements of the target socio-technical context, meaning that if you want scaling, there needs to be an initial intervention and a target context and a process that facilitates replicability from one to another, or extension or elements of growth from one to another. So when we look at elements intrinsic to a given initiative, obviously proof of value. If it's valuable, it's more likely to scale. easy of use and understand, the easier it is for users, or in this case for citizens, to understand their task. The easier the task granularity it is for them, the more likely it is the project to scale. And elements of openness, which include open data, open source software, and open hardware, in terms of the ability of others to be able to leverage the same technology and results that you've been using and producing as part of the initial intervention. But not only that, it's also open governance of the project itself, and open participation. Then we come into elements of the scaling and spreading process. We're talking obviously about communities, the elements around champions, and we've explained that before, and we actually adopted that in WeCount, and this idea of the train the trainer approach, right? How can we find champions that are already leader of community and can autonomously run with a given set of resources and knowledge that the research team or ourselves typically give them, run citizen science intervention within their own communities and their own context. There's obviously elements of communication and dissemination and the role of narratives, which is an interesting one. And finally, the knowledge sharing and transfer resources, which will come back in a moment, as this is one of the main focuses of Ideas for Change at the moment. Then we look at elements of the target socio-technical context, meaning what are the elements of a specific area that makes it more likely for initial intervention to scale there. Obviously, there needs to be alignment of matter of concern, meaning that if a place is experiencing the same issue as our original context, then it's more likely to be the case of scaling, meaning that if there's a famous citizen science project that's around mapping ticks, and this project is not likely to scale in a place where there's no ticks, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Alignment of legal norms. Here it's more, what we've observed is more from the outside of the EU towards the inside of the EU. There are some countries that leverage, for example, citizens-generated data to rank their position in society, right? So this wouldn't be possible legally, and this wouldn't be aligned with the last item that we have in our framework, which is revolves around our social values, right? Okay, so going back to the process, one of the key elements that we think it's crucial to enable scaling and spreading in citizen science is the development of what we call knowledge sharing and transfer resources. Amongst those, there is the role of what we call toolkits. So I guess this is useful also to recap a little bit the main concepts of our presentation. So citizen science is a discipline that involves interventions that are very much context specific. What we've seen is that, and the reason why there's so many pilots within each of the citizen science European project is that one methodology or one strategy for all just simply doesn't work. So here it comes the concept of toolkit. Toolkit, unlike a methodology that gives you a recipe book step by step that you need to follow to achieve the results, or giving you assurances that you'll achieve those results, toolkit are more open, are more flexible. And the idea of toolkit is really to give a set of resources to people so that they can adopt and adapt them to their own context. This specific example here is something that Valeria is at the moment leading as part of CitySets from Ideas for Change, and is the development of an online toolkit for citizen science, which is really a website, an interactive website that includes a set of resources to allow or empower communities to design new participatory projects from the bottom, to end up proposing new and research-informed policy change. The toolkit is organized across the different sections or the different phases of the methodology that Valeria presented earlier. And each phase includes inspirational tools, how to use them, step-by-step guides on how to use them, what type of skills you need to use them, as well as links to downloadable and editable content so that people can simply download a template for a canvas or a template for a survey adapted to their own situation, as well as case studies to showcase how each of the tools is actually can be actually used to achieve change or achieve results with respect to one or more phases of the engagement framework. So I guess that was it.
I was just thinking that still, since we have still 15 minutes and I don't see too much question on Twitter, perhaps what I can do is to share the webpage of the toolkit and show the different section and show how it can be used.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vale. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Just like to thank everybody for listening, and then if there's any question, post them on Twitter. In the meantime, Vale will show us a little bit more of the Citizen Science Toolkit.
Yes, here it is. Can you see it? Can you see my screen, Gio? Yes, okay. So as Giovanni presented, so the idea of the toolkit is that the aim is to support anyone that needs to organize or needs to organize a citizen science project or to support a community to collect data in order to gather evidence of a problem that they have. The idea is that in this toolkit, you can find example of activities, of tools, of methods that you can combine in order to carry out your project. So, the basic idea is that, first of all, you need to follow these 4 main steps, which is described the overall process of a citizen science project. So the first is identify the issues that citizens care about. As said before, this is really the first main step, very important, in order to assure that the type of data that you are collecting are really important for people and all the process is really important for them. So the second one, so if you actually go to the process section of the web page, you can see all the different steps and sub-step. And the idea is that you can have an understanding of the expected outcome of each of the phase. And at the end, you can see example of methods that you can use in order to conduct these activities. For instance, if your goal is to identify citizen concern, at the moment, the toolkit shows this example of activities. For instance, in my presentation, I was showing the example of the pop-up intervention where we distributed the strawberry plant. So here you can see how we have done the rationale behind these activities and how we have conducted it. And at the end, there is the section of get the toolbox where you can download some example of materials that might be useful if you need to replicate such activities. Overall, if you go to the section tools, you can see all the tools available at the moment on the web page. Of course, right now the web page is under development, so we are keeping updating the content while we are conducting the project. So at the moment there are not too many tools, but we are planning to update the web page by the end of the year with more content. And an important things to say here is that you can filter the type of tool according to the activities. For instance, if you are interested on online engagement, Then you can select online engagement and you will see all the example of if you are interested to conduct a workshop, then you can see all the example of activities that you can do during a workshop. And the other filters that are available are number of people involved, because here again, it's not the same if you aim to reach a city scale where perhaps you will need to involve thousands of people rather than perhaps making a conversation with a small number of people, wherein, for instance, the workshop is much more appropriate activity to conduct. And finally, the last filter is about the issues tackled. So here you can select all the example of tools that you can use that has been used in previous projects that are related with, for instance, air pollution or food or green spaces or health and so on. And if you are an expert of citizen engagement, of citizen science, as you have done previous project on this, and you want to share with us your strategy and your tool and your activities, then in that case, you can go to that section, add your stories, and fill in this form. And the idea is that we want to populate this web page with a lot of tools, not only from the City Celt project, but from other projects as well. So you are welcome to be part of the toolkit if you want. And with this, I would say, I don't know if there are questions. I think I couldn't see any question on Twitter. So perhaps I would say that we can close the talk, the session. It was very a pleasure. I hope you enjoy. And I hope if you are in Barcelona, I hope you will take part on the project that we are currently developing. And that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks also from my side. Thanks, Vale, and thanks, Diana, and thanks, University of Pompeu Fabra for inviting us to the WeDiscover Festival. And as Valeria said, we're open for anyone that wants to participate in City Celt and WeCount. Visit our web, ideasforchange.com, and thanks a million, and have a great rest of the day and of the conference.
And the weekend as well.
And the weekend.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Cheers, bye-bye.
Dear you all, we would like to warmly receive you in the closing ceremony of the WeDiscover Days Barcelona. From local to global, this has been the motto from which the activities carried out during the WeDiscover Days Barcelona, organized by the Pompeu Fabra University within the framework of the Utopia project they have been developed.
The motto, from local to global, is also the original catchphrase of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015. The 2030 Agenda wants to transmit to inhabitants of the Earth and to our planet the common idea of a plan shared by the 193 countries that are member states of the United Nations. Among other proposals, the states have pledged to seek world peace and purpose, and not only in the present moment, but also to be able to guarantee them in the nearest future.
In fact, the 2030 Agenda is made up of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which call urgently for action by all developed and developing countries, all of which are committed to this global struggle. It has always been said that union is strength. Our main goal with the activities organized at the WeDiscover Days has been to take note of every single one of the proposals made by you in order to remove the barriers, both physical and abstract, that currently exist.
And above all, to inspire the students of the universities that forge utopia about the challenges we have as a society, about the challenges of the future, about the challenges of Europe that we will have to face. Because we are the future, and it is in our hands, as a result of the great training we've done in universities, to have the initiative to seek and propose solutions to the obstacles we have to solve. Now it's your turn. Once the WeDiscover Days are over, you are the ones who have to define the problem you want to work on and raise different solutions.
It has been a real pleasure for the UPF Utopia team to be able to count on your presence. We are delighted to have hosted all of you, coming from 6 different universities around Europe, virtually in Barcelona.
And remember, from local to global, because we are more global, more interconnected.